Welcome to the 100th episode of Poets and Poetry by Indira. A very special episode, you would all agree. And what better than to look at issues that have always surprised us, amazed us, touched us. So we begin with Harlem by Langston Hughes. Resistance comes in various forms, in different forms, and in different parts of the world. Often, it might be a small outburst, but there are some which leave behind a lasting memory, not only in that geographical part, but all over the world. I'm thinking of the Harlem Renaissance. So called because it began in a part of the US known as the Harlem. Whatever happened then was basically asking for the rights of the Negroes, as we called them then, but we call them the blacks today, to be recognized, to have an appreciation of their art form. And the poet that I have today is Langston Hughes, probably a name that anyone who has read black writing would know, would appreciate. I have a very short poem, but that poem has been used by ever so many speakers in later years. I have a dream, said Martin Luther Jr. So let me begin with reading of this poem. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode, he asks. There is a question. What happens to a dream deferred? Can you postpone a dream? Does the dream come true when you postpone it? Or does it take on and then the metaphors go on? Just think of it. Think of something beautiful. I love eating meat. But if that same meat is old, it stinks. It's fit for nobody. So also he goes on with syrupy fruits, etc. Can I defer my dream, or is it now the time to ensure that what I'm asking for, what I'm fighting for, what is actually my right, he says, should it not be recognized, realized, and given to me? The question remains. The answer, I think, still evades us when we think of oppression in different parts of the world. A new form of poetry, shall I call it? Threnody. Elegy we all know, but an elegy which is set to music or can be sung is called a threnody. And who are we mourning here? Well, this is an Australian poet who is talking about the ravages of war and mourning his countrymen, those young soldiers who were forced to fight a war in Vietnam. Think of the distance between Australia and Asia, and then look at this small country. So these soldiers were forced to fight. The British, who were their masters, sent them out as soldiers. Did they come back? No. Bruce Dawe is mourning them, and in mourning them, fighting against the idea of war. What does the poem begin with? All day, day after day, they are bringing them home. They are picking them up, those they can find, and bringing them home. Look at the tragedy, those that they can find. That means many of them are going to be left there, their bodies to rot, not even given a funeral, a burial. Their dear ones can't mourn over their bodies. So they are brought, and they are continuously being brought. Why? because so many of these young soldiers, Australian soldiers, have died in this war. All war is meaningless, of course. And then the poem goes on. They are bringing them home. Curly heads, kinky hair, screw cuts, balding non-coms. They are high now, higher and higher over the land, the steaming chow mein. Their shadows are tracing the blue curve of the Pacific with sorrowful, quick fingers. Various kinds of people are being described. I also want to bring in here the concept of what today we call the First Nation, that is the original inhabitants of Australia before the Europeans reached there. The poem goes on, and one cannot but agonize over the meaningless deaths of hundreds and thousands in every war which they did not choose and which they were forced to fight out till they died. If one has lived through the Holocaust, survived it, and lives on to write a poem, one can imagine, is it about autonomy? Is it about self-realization? I have now the poet Wisława Szymborska, a Polish poet who later went on to winning the Nobel Prize. She is a poet, an activist, a translator, an essayist, and much more. She takes a line, a title from one of Horace's odes, Non omnis morare, Latin of course, which means I shall not wholly die. And then she goes on to talking about how sometimes we need to probably cut away a part of ourselves, forget the part that is gone, and continue to live on. When in danger, the sea cucumber divides itself, she says. One self it surrenders for devouring the world. With the second, it makes good its escape. Many of us have not seen the sea cucumber, but all of us have seen a lizard at home, most of our Indian homes. And how, when the lizard is injured on the tail, it just lets go of the tail, but it doesn't die. The main part, the lizard, the body of the lizard, continues to live. She says, maybe very sadly, she says, when something terrible has happened and we want to survive and we want to live through it, this is what we do. What does she say? One self it surrenders for devouring by the world. With the second, it makes good its escape. I already began by telling you that she's lived through the Holocaust. And how can one survive that pain, that anguish, that agony, and continue to live? She says, in the middle of its body, there opens a chasm with two shores that are immediately alien. That part of me doesn't know this part of me. That is the only way to survive. A very short poem, I think, which we must read again and again to understand the pain of this survival. Among the many topics of repression, of oppression, of human beings torturing other human beings, I think a word that comes to all our minds is the concept of slavery. The Civil War in US, and we imagine that slavery was abolished, at least in some parts of the country. But was it really? The poet that we have today was a black, born to free parents. But the state itself, the state of Maryland, had not yet abolished slavery. Our poet is Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. And her poem, Bury Me, in a free land. Make me a grave, the poem begins, wherever you will, in a lowly plain or a lofty hill. Make it among earth's humblest graves, but not in a land where men are slaves. I'm dead and gone. Should it matter to me? You might ask. But the poet is very clear. I don't want to be buried in a land where there still are slaves, where slavery still exists. I could not rest if around my grave I heard the steps of a trembling slave. His shadow above my silent tomb would make it a place of fretful gloom. I could not rest if I heard the tread of a coffle gang to the shambles led, and the mother shriek of wild despair rise like a curse on the trembling air. I think one of the saddest things, many sad things of course, but one of the saddest things is when children are taken away from their mothers, they have no right over their child because the master owns both the mother and the child. The poem is heart-wrenching in every which way, so I cannot but read a few more lines. I'd shudder and start if I heard the bay of bloodhounds seizing their human prey. Can you imagine those hounds being let loose because the master has come to know probably that a slave is trying to escape? And I saw her babe torn from her breast. I could not sleep if the lash was heard. Again, a very, very common kind of punishment. If I saw young girls from their mother's arms bartered and sold for their youthful charms. All that I'm asking you, the poetess says, to bury me in a land where there are no slaves. Is it too much to ask for? Obviously, the whole idea of the poem is that slavery should be abolished forever and ever. Is it? Is a question I'd like to leave you with. When we look at Indian society down the ages, there are ever so many issues that come to mind. But to me, one of the most touching ones is the concept of caste. Caste, and along with caste, how can I not think of untouchability? So today, I'm looking at a Hindi poem by Dhoomil. Dhoomil was actually the pen name of Sudama Pandey. And the poem that I have today is a poem called Mochi Ram. Among the various castes that we have in our country, one of the lowest is supposed to be that of the cobbler. And mochi, as you know, is the Hindi word for cobbler. What can I do but not read from the poem called Mochi Ram? रामपी से उठी हुई आंखों ने मुझे क्षण भर टटोला और फिर जैसे पतियाए हुए स्वर में वह हंसते हुए बोला, बापूजी सच कहूं, मेरी निगाह में न कोई छोटा है न कोई बड़ा है, मेरे लिए हर आदमी एक जोड़ी जूता है जो मेरे सामने मरम्मत के लिए खड़ा है. My dear listeners, unless you imagine the scene in your mind's eye, here I am, the cobbler, sitting on the ground, probably by the side of the road, under the shade of a tree, and a man comes along wanting his shoes to be repaired. The mochi says, to me, no man is high or low. From these words, you can understand that he has no belief in the concept of the caste system. Why are you important to me, he says, because aapke joote maramat ke liye aaya hua hai. You have come here because you want your footwear to be repaired. And the poem goes on telling us in many different ways how the caste system affects all of society and of course our mochi also. Let me just read a few more lines. एक जूता और है जिससे पैर को सैर को न वह अकलमंद है न वक्त का पाबंद है उसकी आंखों में लालच है हाथों में घड़ी है, उसे जाना कहीं नहीं है, मगर चेहरे पे वह कोई बनिया है या विदेशी है, मगर रौब ऐसा हिटलर के नाते हो. You may be anything, he says, Mochiram says. You may show off. You may think you are the greatest man. You may belong to any caste. But to me, what does it matter? All that matters to me is just the fact that here I have a pair of shoes which need to be deserved, which needs to be repaired, and that is all that I deserve. The little money that you're probably going to throw at me. Read the poem along and you realize that there is no sense of respect in the person who has come here. He probably doesn't even look at that human being, the cobbler, Mochi Ram. From different corners of the world, we listened to the voices of angst, of pain, of anguish and oppression. And yet, each poem points to the pain and the oppression that engulfs our world.
Each corner of the world has had its own history. But the narrative of oppression and the language of protest have always been the same. These poems showcase who has been able to speak and who was forced into silence.
In war, we see the erasure of identity, of human beings reduced to mere numbers, to cargoes and maybe boxes and much worse.
Oppressive regimes reveal the machinery of dehumanization, stripping away of personhood.
In racism, it is much slower, but far more relentless. The shaving away of one's dignity forever and ever.
Shh. A silenced voice is not a delay of hope. It is a wound that is carried across generations.
The Holocaust left us with the realization it's not only about destroying lives, but an attempt at total erasure of memory too.
Which is why remembrance becomes resistance. To remember is to refuse erasure.
In the cry against slavery, we realized a fundamental truth that no human being can ever be owned.
Freedom here is a restoration of humanity, a name, a voice, a self.
And caste revealed an injustice embedded in life. Well, not in life, even before one is born or speaks or does anything at all.
Structural inequality survives because it is normalized.
And if we hold all these themes together, we begin to see a pattern.
Power always attempts to reduce, to classify, to silence.
And it is poetry that refuses that reduction.
It remembers, it names, it restores the individual.
In war, these were human beings. In racism, dignity cannot wait. In genocide, memory must endure. In slavery, freedom is invisible. In caste, dignity cannot be assigned by birth.
When power attempts silence, it is poetry that preserves the truth.
Poetry cannot command armies or even pass laws.
But it shapes our conscience.
And conscience, over time, shapes the world.
Wherever in this world dignity is denied, language will rise to its defense.
And whenever silence is enforced, poetry will continue to speak out.